Most people think late-night eating is just a bad habit, something to feel guilty about, shake off in the morning, and try harder to avoid next time. They frame it as a willpower problem, a discipline failure, a personal flaw. But what is actually happening when you eat late at night has almost nothing to do with willpower. It has everything to do with timing, specifically the timing of your biology. And when you understand what your body is actually doing in those late hours and what it stops doing the moment food arrives, the decision to stop eating after a certain hour stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like one of the most logical things you could possibly do for yourself. Because here is what most people do not know. Your body runs on two completely different operating systems depending on the time of day. One is built for activity, digestion, and fuel processing. The other is built for repair, restoration, and deep biological maintenance. These two systems cannot run at full capacity simultaneously. They are designed to alternate. And the signal that tells your body which mode to enter is not just how tired you feel or how dark it is outside. It is whether or not food is coming in. When you eat late at night, you're not just adding calories at an inconvenient time. You are sending a biological message that delays, disrupts, and in some cases completely derails the repair system your body was trying to activate. And when you stop eating late at night, something remarkable begins to unfold. Let us follow it carefully, starting from the moment you make the shift and moving forward through the hours and days and weeks of what your body does when it finally gets the space it has been waiting for. The first thing to understand is your circadian rhythm, and not just in the general sense of sleep and wake cycles. Every major organ in your body has its own internal clock. Your liver, your pancreas, your digestive system, your fat cells, your heart, all of them operate on a 24-hour biological schedule that is synchronized with the master clock in your brain. This master clock takes its primary cues from light and darkness, but your organ clocks take their cues from something else as well. They take them from food, specifically from when food arrives. And when food arrives at the wrong time, when it shows up in the middle of the biological night, it sends conflicting signals to those peripheral clocks. It tells your liver it is morning, when your brain knows it is midnight. This mismatch, this internal desynchronization, is one of the most underappreciated drivers of metabolic dysfunction in modern life.
Your digestive system is one of the clearest examples of this. During the day, your gut is primed and ready. Gastric acid production is higher. Digestive enzyme activity is elevated. The muscles of the gastrointestinal tract are more active and more coordinated. Blood flow to the digestive organs is increased. The whole system is tuned for processing food efficiently. But as evening progresses and darkness sets in, the digestive system begins to wind down. Enzyme activity decreases. Gut motility slows. Acid secretion drops. The gut is preparing to shift into a maintenance mode, a period of rest during which it repairs its own lining, regulates its microbiome, and handles the complex housekeeping that it cannot do when it is busy processing a meal. When food arrives late at night, the gut has to abandon that transition, spin back up its machinery, and go back to work. And it does so with less efficiency, less enzymatic support, and slower clearance than it would have had at noon. The result is often bloating, acid reflux, sluggish digestion, and discomfort that people frequently attribute to what they ate rather than when they ate it. Now consider what happens on the first night you stop eating after, say, 7 or 8 in the evening. The hours that follow, the period running from your last meal to the time you wake up, create what is called an extended overnight fast. Depending on when you eat breakfast, this window might run anywhere from 12 to 14 hours or more. And within that window, your body moves through a sequence of metabolic states that have profound effects on your health. In the first 2 to 3 hours after your last meal, your body is still in a fed state.
Blood sugar is processing downward from whatever your final meal produced. Insulin, the hormone responsible for directing glucose into cells and signaling for fat storage, is still elevated. During this phase, fat burning is minimal. The body is using the available glucose first, and it will not meaningfully shift to fat oxidation until insulin levels fall low enough to release the brake on that process. This is why eating late at night is so specifically problematic for body composition. When you eat close to bedtime, insulin is still elevated as you fall asleep. Your body spends the first portion of your sleep in storage mode rather than repair and oxidation mode. Fat burning is suppressed precisely during the hours when it should be ramping up. But when you have stopped eating several hours before sleep, by the time you close your eyes, your insulin levels have already dropped significantly. The fed state has passed, and somewhere in the first few hours of sleep, your body begins crossing a threshold into a metabolic state that most people never reach when they eat late. By hours 4 through 6 of the overnight fast, the liver, which stores glucose as glycogen for quick access, begins drawing on those reserves to maintain stable blood sugar through the night. This is completely normal and healthy. But as glycogen levels start to decline, the liver receives signals to begin mobilizing fatty acids from fat tissue. This process, called lipolysis, is the biological equivalent of unlocking the body's energy reserves and opening them for use. Fatty acids enter the bloodstream and travel to the muscles, the heart, and other tissues to be burned for energy. The fat cells that were locked during the high insulin period after a late meal are now releasing their contents. The body is burning fat while you sleep, not because of any supplement or trick, but simply because you gave your metabolism the time and the signal it needed to make that shift. For most people who have been eating late at night habitually, this level of overnight fat oxidation almost never occurs. They fall asleep in storage mode, spend the night cycling between light sleep and mild digestive effort, and wake up with blood sugar that has not had the opportunity to drop and recover properly. They wonder why they feel groggy in the morning. They wonder why they are hungry almost immediately after waking, even though they ate so close to bedtime. They wonder why their weight seems resistant to change, despite what they consider a reasonable diet. The answer is often timing, not just quantity, timing. Now let us talk about what is happening in your brain during this extended overnight fast, because it is one of the most important and least discussed effects of stopping late-night eating. Your brain, like every other organ, follows a circadian schedule, and one of the most critical processes it carries out during the biological night is a system called the glymphatic system. Think of it as the brain's waste clearance network. While you sleep, the glymphatic system becomes dramatically more active. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the spaces between brain cells, washing out metabolic waste products that accumulated during the day. Among the substances cleared during this process are proteins associated with neurodegenerative conditions, including the amyloid plaques linked to Alzheimer's disease. Here is the connection to late-night eating. The glymphatic system operates most efficiently during deep sleep, specifically during the slow-wave sleep stages that tend to dominate the earlier part of the night. Late-night eating disrupts sleep architecture. It elevates body temperature at a time when core temperature is supposed to be dropping. It keeps the digestive system active and demanding blood flow that the brain would otherwise receive. It triggers insulin responses that interfere with the hormonal environment of sleep. All of this compresses and fragments the deep sleep stages where glymphatic activity peaks. When you stop eating late at night and allow your body temperature to drop naturally and your digestive system to go quiet before you sleep, the architecture of your sleep improves. You spend more time in deep restorative stages, and the brain's overnight cleaning process runs longer, more completely, and more effectively. Within the first few days of eliminating late-night eating, Many people report that they fall asleep faster and wake up feeling more genuinely rested. This is not a placebo effect. It is a direct consequence of reduced digestive workload, improved core temperature regulation, and better hormonal conditions for sleep. And when sleep improves, nearly everything else improves with it. Mood, focus, hunger regulation, stress tolerance, immune function, and metabolism all depend on sleep quality in ways that are impossible to fully separate from one another. Fixing late-night eating often fixes sleep, and fixing sleep sets off a cascade of positive changes that people sometimes attribute to entirely different factors. Let us now move into the metabolic effects that accumulate over the first 1 to 2 weeks of consistent change. One of the most significant is what happens to your insulin response. Eating late at night, particularly carbohydrate-heavy snacks that are the most common late-night choice, triggers insulin release at a time when insulin sensitivity is naturally at its lowest. The body's cells are less responsive to insulin in the evening than they are earlier in the day. This is by biological design. The circadian system expects less glucose to be arriving at night and has downregulated the machinery for processing it. When glucose arrives anyway, the pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin than would have been needed for the same meal eaten at noon. Over time, this repeated pattern of excessive insulin response contributes to insulin resistance, a condition where cells become progressively less responsive to insulin's signal. When you stop eating late at night, you stop triggering insulin release during the window of lowest sensitivity. Your pancreas gets a long overnight rest. Insulin levels stay low for an extended period, allowing cells to reset their sensitivity. Over 1 to 2 weeks, this alone produces measurable improvements in fasting glucose and insulin response that have real implications for long-term metabolic health and weight management. Your liver deserves special attention here. The liver is one of the most metabolically active organs in the body, performing hundreds of distinct biochemical functions around the clock, but it is also one of the most sensitive to circadian disruption. When food arrives at night, the liver receives a signal that conflicts with its internal clock, which expects to be in repair and detoxification mode during those hours. Chronic late-night eating keeps the liver locked in processing mode, handling glucose, producing insulin response proteins, and managing the aftermath of food long past the point when it was designed to shift gears. The result, over months and years, is an organ under chronic metabolic stress. Fatty liver disease, elevated liver enzymes, and impaired detoxification capacity are all associated with circadian disruption and late food timing. Within 2 weeks of stopping late-night eating, liver function markers begin to improve in many people. The organ finally gets its nightly window to focus on detoxification, cholesterol regulation, bile production, and cellular repair. People sometimes notice this as a subtle but real improvement in how they feel in the morning, a reduction in the mild grogginess and heaviness that chronic late eaters come to accept as normal. It is not normal. It is a liver that has been working the night shift without a break, finally getting some rest. Your gut microbiome is also profoundly affected by the timing of eating. The bacteria and other microorganisms that populate your intestines operate on their own circadian rhythms. Certain bacterial species are more active during the day, others at night. There is a natural oscillation in microbial activity that mirrors the host's wake and sleep cycle. When food arrives at night, it disrupts this microbial rhythm. It feeds bacterial populations at a time when the gut ecosystem is supposed to be in a quieter, maintenance-oriented state. Research has shown that circadian disruption in the gut microbiome is associated with increased intestinal permeability, higher levels of inflammatory metabolites, and a less diverse microbial community overall. When you align your eating with daylight hours and give your gut a consistent overnight fast, the microbiome recalibrates. Bacterial diversity tends to improve. The gut lining, which is renewed through a continuous process of cell turnover, gets adequate repair time during the night, and the downstream effects on inflammation, immune function, and even mood through the gut-brain axis become noticeable over weeks of consistent practice. One of the most commonly reported and sometimes most surprising effects of stopping late-night eating is what happens to hunger the following morning. Many chronic late-night eaters have conditioned themselves to have very little appetite for breakfast, which they often interpret as evidence that they are simply not morning people or not breakfast eaters. What is actually happening is that their hunger hormone regulation has been disrupted. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, follows a circadian pattern and is naturally supposed to rise in the morning to prompt the first meal of the day. But when the body received food late the previous night, ghrelin suppression extends further into the morning. The natural hunger signal at dawn is blunted. Over days and weeks of stopping late-night eating, ghrelin returns to its intended rhythm. Morning hunger begins to appear at a natural, appropriate time. The body begins to ask for fuel when it is metabolically primed to use it efficiently, which is during the daylight hours when insulin sensitivity is highest and metabolic rate is most active. By the end of 2 to 3 weeks of consistent change, many people notice something that goes beyond the metabolic and the hormonal. They notice a shift in their relationship with evening. The nights become quieter in a different way. The reflex to reach for something in the kitchen after dinner, which never felt like hunger but always felt like urgency, begins to loosen its grip. This is partly because ghrelin and leptin, the hunger and satiety hormones, are finding their natural rhythm again. But it is also because the dopamine-driven habit loop that late-night eating creates, the familiar comfort of a snack as a reward or a coping mechanism at the end of a stressful day, begins to weaken when it is consistently not reinforced. The body and the brain both adapt. What felt like an irresistible pull toward the kitchen at 10 o'clock at night becomes, over time, simply nothing. Not a battle won, just a habit that dissolved because it stopped being fed. The compounding effects of all of this, better sleep, improved insulin sensitivity, more efficient fat metabolism, a healthier liver, a recalibrated gut, more appropriate hunger signaling, and reduced inflammatory load, do not arrive dramatically or all at once. They arrive the way most real biological changes arrive, gradually, quietly, in the way a room slowly fills with light as the sun rises. People who commit to stopping late-night eating for a month often describe the change not as a single transformation, but as a general recalibration. They feel less heavy, less foggy, more even in their energy, more in control of their appetite, not because they're trying harder, but because their biology is finally working with them instead of against them. The window of opportunity that opens every evening when you choose to stop eating is not empty time. It is some of the most biologically productive time in your entire day. Your body is not waiting to be fed again. It is doing work that it can only do in the absence of food. It is repairing, clearing, recalibrating, and restoring systems that sustain your health, your cognition, your mood, and your longevity in ways that no amount of daytime nutrition can fully compensate for if the nighttime window is never given. The last meal of the day is not just the last meal of the day. It is the starting signal for everything your body was designed to do in the dark. Give it that signal early enough, and you give your body the most underused, most powerful, and most completely free health tool available to you. The hours between your last bite and your first breath of morning are not wasted time. They might be the most important hours of your entire day.